The cafe was crowded, with customers chatting around, the aroma of coffee filling the air, and the clinking sound of cups. Everything was peaceful, just like any other day, but everything would change the moment Jake, a 90-year-old man, walked in. He moved slowly, with weak legs, an aging body, and eyes that reflected the pain of a life lived. His worn-out coat couldn't protect him from the freezing cold outside. As he stepped into the cafe, his every step was quiet, and immediately, the atmosphere in the cafe seemed to grow heavy. The entire space seemed to pause. Some customers turned their heads towards Jake, their eyes filled with curiosity but tinged with contempt. A few exchanged murmurs. "What's this? Why is he here?" The whispered words were enough to make Jake feel like an outsider. Jake continued his way to the counter, his hands trembling and his legs unsteady, but he pressed on, driven by hunger, unable to turn back. He dropped a few worn-out coins into the server's hand, and weakly said, "One sandwich, I don't have much money, but I really need it." Marcella, the cafe owner, furrowed her brow, looking down at him. Her gaze was filled with disdain, offering no sympathy. She shook her head and responded immediately, "If you don't have money, you don't have the right to sit here. This place is not for poor people like you." The cafe went completely silent, every eye fixed on Jake, and the server quietly turned away. The feeling of being abandoned and rejected made him want to crawl into a hole and disappear from this world. But there was nothing he could do but stand there, enduring the humiliation and bitterness. Just when everything seemed to be slipping into hopelessness, the cafe doors swung open again, accompanied by a gentle breeze and the chime of the doorbell. A woman walked in, and immediately, the atmosphere changed completely. It was Isara, a middle-aged, wealthy, and well-known woman in the city. She exuded strength and confidence, with sharp eyes that scrutinized everything around her. She entered the cafe with an unmistakable presence, causing everyone inside to pause for a few seconds to take in her appearance. Isara was not only famous for her success in business, but also for her captivating and authoritative lifestyle. She owned a chain of luxury stores, specializing in high-end products for the affluent. However, today, she wasn't just a member of the elite. She was a woman with an unresolved wound, searching for something she couldn't quite identify. Upon entering, her gaze immediately fixed on Jake, the elderly man with silver-white hair, as though he had just stepped out of the darkness of life. But what drew her attention was the watch on his wrist. It wasn't just any watch. It was the same watch she had given to Tomy, her lover, on a special occasion when they were still together. A meaningful gift that symbolized a promise of a shared future. Tomy had worn the watch as a symbol of love and connection between them. But now, that watch was on Jake's wrist, the father of Tomy. Isara felt a surge of emotions overwhelm her, as memories of Tomy flooded her mind. Each moment, each smile, until the moment he tragically passed away in an accident. These mixed emotions made her feel like the past was unfolding right in front of her, confusing and uncontrollable. She tried to steady her breath to calm herself. She hadn't intended to come into the cafe today, but something unusual had urged her to return. There was something about this space, this small cafe, that made her unable to walk away. She clearly remembered the afternoons she and Tomy had spent here, talking about their future, about dreams they had once imagined. That's why she felt compelled to return, to face everything that had passed. The guilt of Tomy's death, the words left unsaid, the love never expressed, made her unable to leave without learning more about the watch. A part of her wanted to know how the watch had ended up with Jake, and whether this was a sign for her to reconnect with Tomy once more. Isara walked closer to the counter, where Jake still stood, his eyes full of fatigue and worry. The wrinkles on his face were proof of a life full of turmoil, and his eyes seemed to be searching for comfort in the worn-out coins he had just placed on the counter. At that moment, she couldn't stay silent. "Could you tell me where this watch is from?" Isara asked, her voice calm but determined. Her curiosity and deep emotions made the question not just about an object, but about a past she had shared with Tomy. The question was laden with hidden meaning, as if she were trying to uncover an unsolved mystery. Jake looked at her, confused. He didn't understand why she was asking about his watch, but something about her made him feel like she wasn't like the others. He hesitated, his gaze meeting hers, and in that instant, he felt an unusual connection. He answered, his voice softening slightly, "This was a gift from my son, Tomy." Isara suddenly went pale. The words stunned her. "Tomy!" The name echoed in her head like a crashing wave. Tomy, her lover, the one she had loved and lost in a tragic accident years ago. She stared at the watch on Jake's wrist, and it reminded her of the painful and regretful memories. She remembered the moments she and Tomy had shared, the dreams they had drawn together. But it all vanished in a single fateful night. Tears began to fall from her eyes, but she fought to keep them in check. Her emotions burst forth, and she stood there, staring at the watch with tearful eyes. It wasn't just a gift. It was the last remaining piece of Tomy in this world. A gift that symbolized the love she had lost, a future that could never be realized. She slowly lifted her head, and in that moment, everything around her seemed to blur. All that remained was the watch, and the truth that, even though Tomy was gone, the love between them would forever live in her heart. And perhaps, this watch was the only bridge between the past and the present. Isara stared at the watch, her hands trembling. She couldn't believe her eyes, and it felt as though time itself had reversed. She reached out and gently took the watch into her hand. Turning it over, she looked at the back, where Tomy's name was engraved. The memories came flooding back. The days she and Tomy had spent building dreams together, outlining their future. As Jake saw her in this state, he began to sense the tension in the air. He felt like he was becoming part of a secret he didn't fully understand. Do you know Tomy?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. He didn't know why, but something about this situation made him unable to ignore it. Isara sat down beside Jake, still holding the watch tightly in her hand. "Tomy was my lover. He died in an accident. I never thought I would meet anyone connected to him again." Her voice caught, and she turned her face away, not wanting Jake to see the tears streaming down her face. Jake looked at her, feeling the pain in Isara's eyes. He slowly spoke, "Tomy was my son, but I didn't know he had someone like you in his life." Their meeting began from that point, a surprising connection not only because of the watch, but also due to the love and pain they both shared. Isara stood up, still unable to take her eyes off the watch in Jake's hand. She felt like she was witnessing something significant, something she couldn't ignore. She turned back to the counter and looked at Marcella, the cafe owner, who still stood there, her expression unchanged. Marcella felt the change in the atmosphere. She noticed Isara's concern for Jake, and it made her uncomfortable. Just then, a nearby customer spoke up in a mocking tone. "This guy's just here to beg for food, and now someone's helping him?" These words weren't just a simple remark, but truly ignited the tension in the air. Isara turned back to face Marcella, her eyes sharper than ever. "What do you think you're doing? He just wants a meal, a simple meal. Why are you treating him like that?" Her voice wasn't loud but carried an air of authority, enough for Marcella to feel the seriousness in her words. Marcella raised her chin, refusing to back down. "You think you can come in here and criticize me? This man has no money, no rights to be here. If he wants to eat, he should find somewhere else." She even gave Isara a cold look, as if daring her. The atmosphere in the cafe became unbearably tense. Everyone turned to look, and whispers started to spread. Some customers began to feel uncomfortable and considered leaving, but others stood by, unable to take their eyes off this confrontation. Isara wasn't afraid. She took a deep breath and moved toward the counter. "I will pay for his meal. Whatever he wants, I'll cover it all. But I will not let you treat a human being like this anymore." These words shocked Marcella. She stared at Isara, unable to immediately respond. The cafe fell silent. Only the sound of the server trying to maintain the tense atmosphere could be heard. A nearby customer, unable to hold back, muttered, "This is quite the show. Now, not only will the owner lose customers, but also her reputation." Isara turned to the customer and coldly replied, "Anything can be bought, but dignity cannot." The entire cafe fell silent for a few seconds. Marcella tried to keep her composure, but she couldn't deny that Isara's words had started to unsettle her. Isara's intervention wasn't just about a meal. It was about respecting humanity. At this point, the other customers in the cafe couldn't help but listen to what was happening. Isara turned back to look at Jake, her gaze gentler than ever. "You don't need to worry anymore today. I will pay for this meal," Isara said softly, but enough to make Jake feel warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Jake looked into Isara's eyes, a mix of confusion and surprise. What are you doing?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. He couldn't understand why a stranger would care about him, a man who had lost everything. "You don't need to worry," Isara replied. "I'm just doing what I know is right." She looked at the watch in Jake's hand, and her eyes became distant. She couldn't suppress her emotions. "This watch belongs to Tomy, my lover. And you are his father." Jake froze. The words were like a massive shock to him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "My lover? Tomy?" he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Isara sighed and began to tell Jake about her relationship with Tomy. She no longer wanted to keep the secret. "We loved each other for a long time, but in the end, he left." Tears began to fall from Isara's eyes, but she didn't try to hide them. Jake sat there, gripping his watch. "I didn't know about you," Jake said, his voice choking. Tomy never mentioned you." He felt his emotions swell. He didn't understand why his son had kept this relationship a secret, but perhaps, in the remaining years of his life, he would come to understand that Tomy had carried many untold secrets. As the story of Tomy slowly unfolded, the secrets of the past became more complicated. Isara began to speak about Tomy's death, the painful months following the accident. She choked up, unable to contain her emotions. "We had planned for a bright future, but then the accident happened and I couldn't save him." Jake, sitting opposite, felt as if his heart was being crushed by these words. He had lived in the pain of losing his son for so long, and now he realized that it wasn't just him. Isara too had suffered an unforgettable loss. "So, I didn't just lose my son, but you lost him too," Jake said, his voice filled with regret and sorrow. "I don't know who you are, but I know we both grieve the same way." Both sat there in silence, but the connection between them was clearer than ever. They had shared the same pain, an irreplaceable loss. Isara sat quietly at the table, Tomy's watch still in her hand, as if it had become the bridge between her and Jake, between the past and the present. She stared at the watch, her hands trembling, remembering the moments with Tomy. But in that instant, another feeling took over her mind. The feeling that she must face Victoria, Jake's wife, who may never forgive her for what had happened. "Victoria won't accept me easily," Isara sighed, speaking to herself. She didn't know what she could do to heal the wound in the heart of the woman who had lost her son. At that moment, Jake stood up and walked over to her, concern in his eyes. "Do you think Victoria will accept you?" Jake asked. "She hasn't been able to cope with the loss since Tomy passed away. And on top of that, you're the one who made her feel abandoned." Isara could feel the difficulty in Jake's voice. She knew that Victoria wouldn't easily accept anyone, especially someone with a special connection to Tomy. "I can't change the past," Isara replied, "but I can help them rebuild the future." Jake looked at her, a faint hope beginning to flicker within him. Perhaps letting go of everything and allowing the past to rest in peace wasn't easy. But maybe, just maybe, Isara's forgiveness and kindness could help his family find the peace they had lost. Victoria sat under a tree in a small park, her eyes dull, as if the tears had never fully dried. The years she had lived in the pain of loss never eased. Her husband, Jake, often silently endured beside her, but neither of them could find a way out of their lives. Each passing day felt like she was living in her own shadow. Then, a soft sound broke the silence. Isara approached, walking with confidence but still filled with hesitation. She knew this wouldn't be an easy encounter, but she also understood that sometimes the path to healing began with confronting the pain. Victoria looked up, surprised to see Isara. She recognized her instantly but was speechless. After all these years, she never imagined she would face the woman who had driven Tomy away. Isara walked closer and gently sat beside Victoria. "I know you may hate me," she said softly, But I want you to know that I never meant to tear your family apart. Tomy loved you, and I loved him. We both lost the person we loved." Victoria heard these words but was still filled with anger. "You're the reason my family fell apart," she said coldly. "Tomy couldn't live in a divided family like that. You took him away from us." Isara looked into Victoria's eyes, unwavering. "I can't change what happened, but I can help you and Jake find happiness. Tomy would want us to forgive each other. That's the only thing I can do right now." A silence fell between them. Victoria felt the pain rising in her heart, but for the first time in many years, she sensed a glimmer of light in the darkness. "Maybe I was wrong," Victoria said, her voice softening. "Maybe I've been too rigid all these years." The three of them, Jake, Isara, and Victoria, decided to embark on a journey of healing. It wouldn't be an easy one, but it was a long road to overcome past wounds, the pain of loss, and the process of forgiveness. Jake never imagined that, after all these years of pain, he would find peace again. Victoria, though still skeptical, began to accept Isara's help. Together, they started rebuilding their lives, and although they couldn't fully forget what had happened, they were ready for a new beginning. One evening, as the last rays of the sun faded, Isara led Jake and Victoria to a small house where they could start their new life. "This is where we'll begin again," Isara said, her eyes filled with hope. "No past can be rewritten, but the future will always open for those willing to open their hearts." Jake and Victoria looked at each other, holding hands, as a promise to face everything together. "Thank you, Isara. You've helped us find our family again," Jake said, his voice choking. Isara simply smiled, feeling peace within. She didn't need thanks. Seeing them find each other again was enough. "No need to thank me. I did it all for Tomy. He will always live in our hearts." As they all entered the new home, the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, they knew that though the past couldn't be changed, love and forgiveness had shown them the path to happiness. The story ended with a powerful message about forgiveness, kindness, and the ability to heal past wounds. Through love and patience, those once torn apart overcame the challenges to find peace. This story is not only a lesson in humanity, but also a testament that in every heart, there's the capacity to forgive and love, and from that, build true relationships. Thank you for following this story.